Ah, Christmas time. The snow is falling, there are chestnuts roasting on an open fire, the children are outside building snowmen, we're all wearing scarves and woolly hats, our noses red from the cold as we venture forth into the chilly night air to sing carols. Except, of course, no, I live in Australia. It's the middle of summer. We just had our hottest day on record. Parts of the country very nearly hit 50 degrees, and that's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Also, there may well be chestnuts roasting on an open fire somewhere because there are a hell of a lot of open fires around at the moment. And by open fires, I mean rampaging bushfires threatening major cities and tiny towns and everything in between, including where I live. There are no snowmen, no scarves or woolly hats, and although there are carols, the people singing them have to worry more about heat stroke and smoke inhalation than frostbite. This difference in cultural perceptions around the concept of Christmas may partially explain why, until I played it again for this video, I'd completely forgotten that James Bond 2 Robocod was a Christmas game. But it only partially explains it. I mean, the whole game takes place in Santa's workshop, the bearded fat man himself makes an appearance, and one of the music tracks is an aggressively annoying mashup of Christmas carols. But for whatever reason, it's a game I just don't associate with Christmas. And believe it or not, the fact that I'm doing a video on it now is a genuine coincidence. Well, mostly. I admit I'm publishing this video a few days earlier than intended, just so it doesn't seem like it's a touch too late, or massively early. What I do associate James Bond 2 with is the platformer genre itself. It was actually the first proper platformer I played. A friend of a friend had the Amiga version, and I wowed them by killing the first boss, an incredibly easy feat that had somehow eluded them. Not long after that I got a Master System with Alex Kidd and Sonic the Hedgehog, and much as I loved them, they kind of lacked the speed and pizzazz of Robocod with its Amiga-powered shine and glitz. Even after I moved on to the Mega Drive and its superior versions of Sonic the Hedgehog, the memory of James Bond 2 retained a certain magic in my mind. Maybe that was just because of the fact it managed to cram two incredibly bad puns into its name. I'm a sucker for bad puns. In any case, let's have a look at how it's held up. The intro is brief and to the point. The toys in Santa's workshop need help, and James Bond is here to provide it. This music probably sounds familiar because it's a direct reference to the Robocop theme, which, you know, makes sense. Then you start the game and... oh man, this music is even more familiar, to me at least. It sure brings back some memories. It's simple, it's repetitive, it's kind of annoying, but every few months for the last 3 decades I've woken up with it playing in my mind, over and over, refusing to die. Maybe it's a nostalgia factor, but I still like hearing it. Which is good, because there are only a few pieces of music in this game, and this one is the most overused. One other thing I fondly remember about this game is the clever integration of the cheat codes. There are only 2 of them to my knowledge, and to activate them you have to pick up certain items in a specific order. The first set of items are basically the first things you see in the game, and if you get the cake, then the hammer, then the earth, the apple and the tap, you get complete invincibility, but only for something like 5 or 10 minutes. 1,000,000 bonus points if you notice the first letters of those items spells out the word cheat. The second set of items are these ones here. For 1,000,000,000 bonus points, want to try to figure out what order you need to pick them up in? No? Kids these days, no initiative, that's your problem. Lips, ice cream, violin, earth, snowman. This one gives you infinite lives, and I'm tempted to use it, but I don't remember the game being particularly challenging, plus it hands out extra lives like my doctor hands out blood pressure meds. I may regret this choice. The gameplay is pretty simple. You run, you jump on enemies to kill them, you collect stuff, while avoiding spikes and pitfalls. It's platforming at its most basic, but the handling is sharp and there's a sense of momentum that's reminiscent of the Sonic games. Unfortunately, it's not always handled as well as in those games, as it's not uncommon in Robocod to find yourself hurtling down a slope only to run into an enemy or a spike pit, or, at best, just slam into a wall. To be fair, Sonic also occasionally did stuff like that, but not to the same extent and not with the same impact to the player. In this game you have limited hit points, represented by the chips held by James in the bottom left corner. Lose them all and you lose a life, naturally enough, which are in turn represented by the number of fingers he's holding up. You can actually have more than 4 lives at a time, fortunately. Also fortunate is the fact that stars, which restore a hit point, are quite common. The only real addition to basic platforming gameplay is James's ability to stretch out his body, courtesy of his robo-suit. When he reaches the ceiling, he can grab on and then pull himself along. I don't know exactly what's going on inside that suit to allow James's fishy body to stretch out like that. It's not like it's a simple hydraulic lifting device. His feet, the flippers, remain on the ground while his head rises, so unless there's some sort of self-contained wormhole in that thing, his spine must be rather elastic. Still, the experience does nothing to dull the goofy smile on his face or his exuberant little side-to-side shuffle. Actually, this stretching ability is rarely required to get through the game, although it can sometimes be used to find hidden items and secrets. I'm half convinced it was put in the game just so they could do the Robocod pun. Speaking of secrets, that's one thing this game does well. There are a lot of them, and they come in many different forms. There are your traditional hidden passages behind fake walls and items stashed in hard-to-reach corners, as well as numerous small special stages containing lives, health items and points pickups. One particularly amusing secret is revealed if you just move left instead of right in the very first level to find an exit that bypasses the entire first area altogether. Good for speedrunners no doubt, but if you're going to play this game, you might as well actually play it. There's also an entire hidden sub-area of Santa's workshop, accessed via a secret on the exterior of the building. This outdoors environment acts as a sort of hub world or level select, although not much of one, as you basically have to do all the levels in the specified order, with room for only minor variation. The levels themselves are mostly straightforward and pretty simple in terms of layout, but there is a good degree of variation in other ways. There are quite a few forced scrolling levels, none of them too challenging. There are a couple of upside down levels which take a bit of getting used to, and then there's my favourite, the jelly levels. Almost every surface in these levels is incredibly bouncy, and unless you're careful you'll find yourself bouncing here and there and everywhere like some sort of cartoon bear. Actually, I advise not being careful. It's really rather fun to just be slung around like one of those bouncy balls you get in those coin-operated machines, and these levels seem to be designed to simply be fun rather than challenging. There are also several different vehicles scattered around. There's a plane, there's a car, there's a bathtub, which, okay, is not usually considered a vehicle, but this is a game that stars a fish wearing a robo-suit, so realism is clearly not a priority. You can also get a pair of wings as a power-up, which is arguably the most useful form of transport as it's the most manoeuvrable. They also make some levels absolutely trivial, as you can just fly along the top of the screen and avoid pretty much everything. There is actually another aim to the levels other than just getting to the end of them, and that's finding and saving the penguins scattered throughout the environments. Not all levels contain these penguins, but in those that do, the exit won't activate until you've found every single one. Unfortunately, this gameplay element seems to have been a complete afterthought, as only once or twice throughout the whole game do you actually have to search for them. Mostly the penguins are just located right near the exit. I didn't know it until quite recently, but apparently these penguins actually count as product placement, as they're a reference to penguin biscuits. Shout out to the most excellent Kim Justice for making me aware of this fact. I had no idea. I don't think they were ever sold in Australia, but apparently they were the inspiration for our legendary Tim Tam biscuits. The fact that the penguins are there primarily as advertising may explain why the rescue element feels somewhat shoehorned into the game rather than an integral part of it. It's a shame really, because the game would have benefited from giving the player a reason to more fully explore its environments other than secrets or score pickups. Speaking of score pickups, honestly they're another thing I hold a certain amount of nostalgia for, which may be baffling to gamers born this millennium. They harken back to a time when games had no greater goal than to make a number go up by running over a pair of cherries, or a gold coin, or a rainbow, or a vacuum cleaner, or a trash can, or a disembodied mouth. Okay, some of those are a bit off the wall, but there was an immediate gratification to picking them up. Don't get me wrong, I'm extremely glad games have evolved and become more sophisticated, but I'm also glad to sometimes be able to play a game that lets you revel in pure, meaningless acquisition. The overall visual style of the game is really rather appealing in my opinion. The world is bright and colourful, and it's full of character, helped by the fact that just about everything has eyes. The enemies, the pickups, platforms, background elements, it doesn't matter what it is, it may very well come equipped with a pair of cartoony googly eyes. It could be a submarine, a guitar, a plectrum, or a random part of the ground. Or it could be these flagpoles which seem particularly aghast at their fate, racked by the freezing Arctic wind, doomed to forever look down on the world but never be a part of it. As you might have seen, there's a great deal of variety to the environments, and they tend to be whimsical in a way that I found truly magical as a kid, and charming as an adult. They don't even pretend to make sense. The toy and food-based levels are fair enough, I guess. Toys and food are Christmas staples. But then there's a musical level and one that seems to be based around stationery. I guess the linking theme is things that could conceivably be given as presents. But it doesn't matter, the sheer variety keeps you guessing and helps sustain interest. The worst part of the game is, well, it's extremely easy to pick a worst part, and that's the boss fights. There aren't many of them, and they're so simple and easy they're almost pointless. The only real reason to fight them is to break up the repetitiveness of the rest of the music, as the boss theme is not too shabby, even if it is as simple as the rest of the music. In gameplay terms though, the bosses are not great. Their movements are simple as hell, and all you have to do is jump on their heads a few times. Even the ballerina boss is made only slightly more interesting by the fact it's mirrored around the centre of the screen, with 2 bosses and 2 Jameses. The last boss is slightly more challenging than the others, but no more interesting. I managed to die quite a few times, mainly through impatience and boredom. I even have to use a continue, but it doesn't take long to defeat. And then you're treated to the end sequence, which is... well, it's a conclusion, I guess. And it serves as a reminder that this is, after all, a Christmas game, which I'd forgotten. Even the rendition of Jingle Bells didn't make me think of Christmas after a few minutes. It's like when you say a word over and over until it loses all meaning. I honestly found myself listening to it after a while and thinking, I know that tune, but what is it? Okay, final verdict time. It's safe to say that this is a good game, and it was undoubtedly great for its time, but it's not quite a true classic of the highest caliber. It doesn't have the timeless, finely honed design of a Mario game, and it doesn't have the flair or artistry of a Sonic game, but it's still absolutely worth playing. In fact, it offers something that most games don't these days, and that's a simple, fun, undemanding platforming experience. Well, thanks for watching. This is where social etiquette might dictate that I say something like Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, but instead I'll just say, bah humbug, and get off my lawn.